Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first of our spring series, NorthStar Genetics spring series educational webinars. I'm Tyler Russell with NorthStar Genetics, and we would love to have been in person with everyone, connecting and asking questions and learning together. But with the times, we still felt it was important to try to get our content that we had planned out to everyone in a virtual way. We've got 4 different spring series plans starting today with a challenging fall. Now what to do with Jason Hanson from Rock and Roll Agronomy. And then next week we'll have Harry Davies talk about a plan B. The following week we have Dieter Schwartz talking about corn emergence and some tips and tricks to getting your corn off to the best start. And following in the end of April with Al Kleiss talking about the grain markets and some of the things happening. So we're really excited to be bringing these 4 webinars to you guys. And hopefully you guys don't have any issues with the technology. And at least with the technology, we can reach a wider audience than what maybe would have just been joining us in Morris. So please provide us any feedback and questions, and we hope you enjoy today's session. Just a couple housekeeping items as we proceed today. If you do have any questions that you'd like to ask, there's a couple ways to do it. One is by texting to 204-403-8444. We can get it on our phones here, our text, and then we can ask Jason, just so we don't have lots of people coming on and taking their phones off mute and having some background noise. So you can obviously text me at 403-8444, or you can enter your question on the chat page. So on your main screen, you can hover over the conversation and type in your question in the chat, and we can get it and ask Jason that way as well. Just in case we do have problems with audio coverage, I will be muting all of the microphones. So if you do want to ask a question the old-fashioned way by just saying it, you can unmute your computer and ask. And if you have dialed into our audio conferencing features, you might have to push *6 just to get your phone off mute. Also, I wanted to let everyone know that we will be recording this webinar for the purpose of sharing with others who either haven't been able to join or maybe experienced some technical difficulties along the way. We will have this up on our website so you can stream along after in case you missed something as well. So without any further ado, I'd love to introduce Jason Hanson. He comes from us. He's a consultant, not only with his clients on the agronomy perspective down in North Dakota, but he also has a number of ag retailer contract consulting as well up in southern Manitoba. And he's been doing a lot of talks and working with his clients on what do we do with this challenging fall that has given us problems here for the spring. So he's going to talk through about 12 different topics, including everything from crops in the field, soil sampling, fertilizer, ruts and compaction, all the way down to some potential weed concerns and what do we do. So we're glad to have Jason Hanson with us. He currently resides down in Webster, North Dakota. And please fire away with any of your questions that you have, either by text or by chat. And we look forward to the next 45 minutes to an hour with Jason as he shares some recommendations with us. So Jason, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Loud and clear. That's good.
Awesome.
So I'll maybe turn it over to you to you can give a little bit more introduction on yourself or bio or where people can reach out, and then I'll let you carry on with crops in the field and what to do.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Tyler and NorthStar Genetics. First time doing a meeting like this, and these guys helped me out quite a bit with it. So it's a unique way, but that's how we have to do stuff. So yeah, I put up my social media platforms. I use them quite a bit. They're all the same on there if you want to follow. And I usually post quite a bit of agronomy stuff throughout the season. And so this presentation is kind of started back in December because we had that blizzard in October, and it kind of changed a lot of things, particularly around crops that were out in the field. And, corn gets most of the attention because it was the highest percentage of crop that was out. But I've had, in my travels this early spring, January, February, it was nothing to see. I mean, there was corn, there was soybeans, there was wheat, canola, flax, edible beans, sunflowers, and of course in the Red River Valley east of where I live, there was still sugar beets and potatoes. So very large economic impact, but also everybody's always planning for the next year. And here we have all this crop that is out. And what do you think? When do you think it'll come off? How do you think it'll stand? And then what do you think we'll have to do for 2020? So a lot of this is gonna, there's probably a couple things, two main things all the way through this is patience and simplicity, because of just the way this year treated us. Here in the States, we have preventive plant as an option under federal crop insurance, but that is something, at least in my area, that nobody wants to do, because if you've got corn crop out there, you want to get it off and you want to get another crop seeded, because preventive plant just kind of turns into a high chance of preventive plant the next year, and you kind of get into that cycle. There over east in the Red River Valley, there's probably more talk of that after this last shot of snow we've had. They are a lot wetter, but there too, they have a lot more tile drainage, and so they're hoping that isn't the case as well. But what does that mean for planting next year? So this was like the first place to start, because it just caught so many people by surprise, is that we had that much crop out in the field. How is this going to affect our rotation? How is it going to affect what I want to do? And that's where we were. And the good news is particularly most of the corn is coming off right now. It's stood up fairly decent. It has earlier maturities. It's held test weight fairly decent. And I would say people are in a more optimistic mood. They being secluded on the farm or the ranch, everybody's itching to get some stuff done. We just need it to go. So this was the first thing that kind of popped into my mind. And that played into kind of the second slide here. And that is, if you got all this crop that's outstanding, what do you do for soil testing? And for the most part, I didn't get any of my corn sampled, obviously. I have most of it off now, but most of my acres are probably going to be going to soybeans. But there's the possibility of having maybe wheat. I hope not, but more than likely edible beans or canola. And in that case, I am going to have to get a soil sample, because the yields that my growers reported back to me were fairly decent on corn. And we're going to need to know where we're at around crops that have a need for nitrogen. Soybeans, I can go sample, but I can also go off some history. I work with AgVice Labs in Northwood, North Dakota, and I can pull up all that information on fields and go back in history. I prefer to sample in the fall for a couple of reasons. One, it probes nicer, it's drier, so there's less mud. I'm not right behind the process of either tillage or fertilizing or seeding, and like in a spring, and I'm pressured to get results in a quick turnaround time. I also like the consistency of the fall. If I sample in the fall, I try to stay sampling in the fall. But if someone takes on some new land, which that's happened this spring, or a new piece of land that they've acquired, rented, I will sample that. So there's some of that to do. Most of it probably won't, because I can go off of history. I'm just trying to be efficient, because the springtime you generally drive and sample where you don't get stuck. And so that affects your sample. Quality wise, it's a little challenging because it's wetter, but whatever sample you take, I'm very confident in what the lab gives me back for results.
That dragged into a question here, Jason. Are there specific differences between a test in the fall and the spring? Are there things that if you've normally always soil sampled in the fall and now you're forced to do it in the spring, is there some things you have to compare differently because you took it at a different time?
If for nitrogen, no, that's going to be, I feel very confident with that. There might be some fluctuation in phosphorus, but maybe 1-2 parts per million, not that big a thing. There can be some differences in potassium because we just are wetter generally in the spring, although this last fall it was fairly wet. So from last fall to this spring, probably not that big a difference. Overall trend, there can be. So for me, it's just about contending with mud and frost, because you'll pull up frost and your sample is defrosting, thawing, and everything gets muddy in your vehicle. I have a hydraulic probe in a truck, so I drive out there. But generally, no, there's not that big a difference. Probably not you're going to see between these 2 years, but there can be some differences if you have an extremely dry fall and a wetter spring. Then you can probably see them.
Nice.
Okay, so that rolls into probably one of the bigger questions, and this is over a wide area, in that due to the type of year we had, there just is not a lot of ground that got fertilized. And just an example for the state of North Dakota, I would say less than 1% easy got any fall fertilizer on, and in some areas that's just P and K. So that pulls up a logistics concern, because as you move across, our eastern part of our state was a lot wetter, and we had more snow. So the eastern third, maybe 40%. The west, a pretty open winter. So their issue is frost, and they are generally more no-till, reduced till, and everybody was wet. So that was probably the biggest reason for not getting it on. So there's this logistics concern that's going to be demand for service. A lot of places are full of fertilizer now, but it feels very much like 2019. Our supply comes up on the river, and Minneapolis didn't get their locks fixed. So everybody's full now, but we're all going to go at about the same time outside of, say, southern Minnesota and eastern South Dakota. So there's going to be some issues there. I will say this: there has been more talk with people about knowing that they cannot get a lot of fertilizer on in the traditional way they'd like, which would be either spring anhydrous or spring urea, and then seed, and then that's your plan. This year, I think we're going to see more people that are going to plant and have the option of top dressing or side dressing. I've heard that with barley and wheat, corn, and possibly canola, just because there's going to be so much demand and pressure on the market right away. And so with all the acres that need to be done and all the fertilizer that needs to be put on, the other factor is, I had a poll out on Twitter 2 days ago now about how are you going to cover urea in particular. We're going to be a big urea market here. We generally don't do any spring anhydrous or very little, and so it'll all move toward granular urea. We're not a big liquid market here. And so with acres to cover in a quick manner, there's people wondering, hey, can I use a Salford or a Joker or a Quick Till or a Pro Till because I don't think I want to lose moisture with a field cultivator, and that's a lot faster and easier. And it'll depend on a few things. Generally, vertical tillage is probably not the best choice for covering urea to save it. Field cultivator is definitely better, but probably a rain is the best. So there's going to be some people, I think we're going to see a lot of experimenting this year with different types of implements to incorporate our urea in a very fast manner, because we have a lot of work to do. And the later we get here and the cooler it feels today or the next week, people are going to get antsy, and I think they're antsy anyway with just everything else that's going on with COVID-19. So a lot of fertilizer recommendations are getting maybe rearranged this year around simplicity and speed, and taking a lot of the complexity out, and making sure we're doing the best thing we can for a decent crop. I don't think we're going to see a lot of extras this year. So it's that's going to be one of the challenges. Communication, in my opinion, with whoever you're dealing with on fertilizer and the services around it, or you're doing it yourself within your farm operation or retail organization, will be absolutely key. Making sure where you sit on lists, talking ahead of time, having plans. This is going to be a big key thing this year.
In question here, Jason. So heavy clay soils, field cultivator, or I'll just maybe say, what do you recommend for some of our heavy clay soils for trying to incorporate this fertilizer?
That's going to be a, I know that a Selford is probably one that is going to do better in a wetter clay soil than, say, a pro till or a quick till. They just don't seem to do as well when the soil gets wet. Now, a Selford, it might look like you're throwing a lot of dirt, but it's going to depend on the depth you're running it to cover up urea. So that's a joker might be just better. It'll depend on how much soil you can get buried over the top of that urea prill. So that's a field cultivator is probably the best, but I know I've talked to a lot of people and they've mentioned their Selford, they mentioned a heavy harrow. I have not had good luck with a heavy harrow. I don't recommend it. It looks decent, but when you get off the headlands where you're doubling up on your passes and you get out in the middle of a field, there's more urea partially covered or on the surface than you'd like. So then what comes into play is, can you afford to use a nitrogen stabilizer? And I think there's going to be more of that looked at this year. Putting that out there, checking your forecast, using a Selford in that context, I think there's going to be a lot of that done. I feel more comfortable with that recommendation than just spreading it, Selfording it. You'll have to double check if you use whatever you've got for a piece of equipment. I have a farmer use a case with sweeps as his seeder. That gets good coverage. I've got a couple guys with brand new John Deere drills, and they're 10-inch spacing. It's just like direct seeding. There's hardly any dirt movement with that. So yeah, it's going to be, I got clay soils too. I'm concerned. I always tell them this is the best, but they're going to do what they think needs to get done. And I think it's going to be a lot of vertical tillage. So I'm going to gear people more toward a stabilizer, or think about seeding and watching your forecast and putting fertilizer on maybe at different times.
Nice. Thanks, Jason.
I mean, everybody likes simple and fast, and it's always easy for someone to say who's not in your operation or what your conditions are, what you should do. But I think everybody will. That's the communication part. Is the people you've got in your inner circle that you trust and you watch and what they do, and just lean on each other, because there'll be a lot of stuff this spring to work through. Yeah, the next topic here, seed quality. I'm just going to breeze through the next three things around seed. I put seed quality down because we had a lot of crop that was out late. I mean, we had bad falling numbers on our wheat. We had sprout issues in two-row barley in particular. And so think about those crops, and if you've got a lot of crops came off late. So we've had companies down here in the States that have decided that some of their seed doesn't meet specs. So I know most seed has been spoken for and is planned, but it is just something to keep in your back of your mind, that the type of year, Mother Nature, just that's how it was. But I'm not as worried about that, because most people, if they've got seed ordered, it's high quality and it's met specs.
Yeah, and I can add from a NorthStar Genetics perspective, Jason. We make sure that we have the highest quality standards. So we test in the fall, we test after we process the seed, and we've been doing some spring germs and figures as well. And we got great quality of seed this year, and we're really pleased with what we're sending out to customers. So awesome that you bring it up, and we feel comfortable that we're only sending the best lots and the best quality to our customers.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, we can. Okay. So this ties in. Yeah, seed data was a very hot commodity this year because of just the way the year turned out, particularly around plot data. When you got snowbanks on the north side and the west side of plots, it's really tough to get decent data, and things were just compromised because of the year. I know with seed being purchased, it's easy to fall back on some history, and this is where your network, particularly, whoever you're buying seed from, have that conversation, and your own data and experience. But it was just a challenge this year to get decent quality data. I've gone back the last couple of years just to pull up stuff to reiterate my confidence in what's going on for this upcoming year, and most people that's what they've done too. So let's hope we don't have another big blizzard like that again from a yield data standpoint. And the next slide here, seed maturity. Now this primarily focuses around corn. In 2018, we had a very large heat unit. We had sunflowers that were desiccated in August. We had corn that came off dry, and nobody cared that much about test weight. And this year, it was a different story. So our test weights, particularly in corn, came up the earlier the maturity. This year, they didn't move up as much if it was a later maturity. So some differences there. Soybeans, not too much. People are sticking with their maturities this year. And surprisingly, people are sticking pretty close to their corn maturities, a little bit movement earlier. But it's just paying attention to that, because last year was that correction. We've kind of had these long falls, nice harvests, and this year was a little different because we had the days, we just didn't have the quality of days. So yeah, okay, here's probably one of the bigger ones that is across every place. The drought monitor that we use for the United States, we've got just a little bit of an area out by Williston in the very northwest part of the state. Otherwise, the state is no drought signs whatsoever going into spring, which is the first time in a very long time. And I've seen a lot of, it doesn't matter, conventional, no-till, strip-till, just dealing with this scenario, that picture up there on the top. And I'll go back to, it looks very disheartening, but in 2016, we were very wet in the northeast part of North Dakota, and very similar scenarios. Harvest was delayed. You had to have rear wheel assist and or tracks on your combine, and you were trucks on the roads. Grain cart mobility was limited. We thought we'd have ruts for 5 years, and everything got left. And we had a winter that would be, I'd consider, very similar to this one, in that it was, we got snow. It wasn't too terribly cold, and we got into the spring, and our ruts, which we thought we'd have for 5 years, were not that bad. And for the most part, only in severe cases was it an issue. So I think what's going to happen is this will be a pretty good indicator at where your fields are going to dry out first. But this is where, again, a lot of this vertical tillage is going to come into play. The people I've talked to help me get a better understanding is you're going to see probably a lot of Selfords for sure, maybe light discs, and you're going to want to go parallel to the way you combined. And I know they aren't all perfectly straight, and there's some sloughs and things, but yeah, that works better you're just trying to knock the top of the ridges off into the furrow if you possibly can in order to get in there. The aggressive tillage that we probably need to do, I would recommend waiting till fall, because we're still relatively wet, and this is going to be a challenge. So in this top picture, I would light disc or Selford, and I'd be going back and forth on this field to try to do some good instead of going left and right, and that kind of worsens the issue. So, and then it's the toughest word in agriculture, and that's patience, because we're going to get out there when it's still wet to try to do it, because someone's got a tiled field or something that drains well, and you feel you have to go. You're going to probably have to stay off of there, because we can worsen it in the spring. So this is going to be our biggest challenge, I think. And this is a reminder again, if anybody that uses a quick till or pro till, if it's dry, that'll work fairly decent. But if it is still wet, those pieces of equipment have a tendency not to work as well as a Selford or even a light disc. And so we'll find out a lot of things this year, but that's probably the route we're going to take with this. And then let nature take its course, let things dry out a little bit. Don't get in too big of a hurry. I know that's easy to say, and it's tough to do, but I think we're going to have to really pay attention to this scenario, because it's going to, our seed bed prep, a yield potential, all those type of things. I mean, it's not going to just go away in a year, but we're just going to have to be patient and careful with this.
How many times might you have to go over it? So if I have to put some fertilizer down and I got to smooth out these rusts, what do you recommend as far as timing? Smooth out first, then go over, or is that gonna? What's your thoughts?
Personally, I would smooth out first, and then I would use it to cover up fertilizer later. That's what I would do. I think it'll give you. I'd hate to have an investment out there laying on the ground, and then you find out you can't cover it. I'd rather get out and see how it goes first, go after the ruts, and then come back later on that. So that's going to be my recommendation, I guess, to my growers. And I think there's going to be multiple passes, because the first one I think is going to be a lot shallower and lighter, just to kind of tickle that top and knock some things around, and then you're probably going to be a little bit more aggressive with vertical tillage, come back again. So that's what I see happening, and it's the speed. That's probably the biggest thing. You can just cover more acres that way than versus, say, field cultivating, and then it could you don't know what you're bringing up and how a lumpy seed bed with a field cultivator. So
Good. We'll keep. I don't think there's any more questions on that yet.
yeah. Yeah, so this kind of relays into the next one. Because of how wet it was and the lateness of harvest, we have just a tremendous amount of crop residue this year. We probably had in at least the eastern half of the state the whitest snow in the ditches we've had in I don't know how long, because we didn't have any soil blowing. So that there was a benefit to not having all of this field work done, is that we didn't lose very much topsoil. But now we do have a lot of residue to deal with. And so that this will go back to what's the avenue people are going to do. Last year, I know that we had a lot more people. I won't call it no-till, I'll call it direct seeding. And those are people that just decided that this year, last year, we're going to just seed into the crop. And it looks good, it looks decent, you go into it, it is going really good, but you find out that if you are not a direct seeding person and you're using conventional tillage, sometimes you're a planter, I should say, your double disc openers, for one thing, aren't sharp enough. And so I saw a lot of variability in planting depth, because it was we had residue amounts that went from not too bad to light all the way to heavy or excessive. And so stuff was riding up. You weren't getting good seed to soil contact. You weren't a consistent depth. So I believe there'll be a lot of vertical tillage here to get some soil darkened up, to move this stuff up, fluff it up a little bit in order to get sunlight and heat on this mat of residue that we have. And it's just about anything. Now, things like canola and soybeans and edible beans, I'm not as worried about, but wheat, barley, corn, those I am. So it'll be a matter of how your soil flows through your piece of equipment. I think there's going to be a lot of vertical tillage, and there's just that'll be our challenge. Now, another question that I've got posed to me: we have some programs for reduced or no-till EQIP and CSP conservation programs down here in the States, and they don't allow tillage. And so people in that country they have ruts, and they're wondering what to do. They can't use tillage. And so the question of burning has come up, and there will be nutrient loss with burning. But in talking to people last year, there was people that if that's not a standard practice and you're doing it once every, when you have to time frame, it's not that bad of a deal, because those fields you will get into sooner. And people that did it last year had good luck. Now, I did learn this that I'll pass on. You would rather have a quick burn across a field than a slow burn. And the slow burn, what it does is you just have a more intense heat that stays in an area, and say you've got it dried out somewhat and there's cracks in the ground. You can, with intense heat, you can have some sterilization impacts that you will see if you seed into that. So I'm worried that, we have I think out western part of our state, we will see more fires, but we don't have any breaks because they don't have any tillage. So you're going to have to pay attention to, we have a lot of fields that we just can't go burn because we could have some stuff get out of control. But this will be, again, patience. And I think if you get some tillage in there, whether it's still a field cultivator or anything else, to get some stuff a little dark, if you do direct seed into it, make sure your equipment, the soil flows nice when you're doing it. Make sure your double disc openers, if that's what you're using, cut decent, and monitor your seed depth.
We might, at a comment here, we might have a lot of the cornfields burnt to get rid of all of that because we had to cut it higher with the, harvesting late and stuff. Is there anything we can do to set up a quick burn versus a slow burn, or is that just dependent on the moisture conditions at the time?
Yeah, I found that cornfields burn very well. They'll burn even if you have any amount of residue on the ground. It doesn't take long. Even a back burn. I would probably set up borders where you back burn, or you got a small disc or something you can get around fields to give yourself a border, if that works. We're going to see a lot of corn get burnt off, I think, as well, because there'll be another issue we'll talk about here, but yeah, there'll be a lot of that done. Just be safe. Back burn probably gets a lot warmer, but if you got a back burn and you can get a black zone to get a quick burn on the other end of the field, you just got to manage your wind, I guess. Watch your days.
I got a different question here. I don't know if you know the answer, Jason, but just regarding burning stubble, with COVID-19 being a lung virus, do you think burning might be banned altogether?
That I don't know. Aren't we classified as the essential workers? I don't know. I would say nothing would surprise me, but I think by the time we get around to that, let's hope not. I think there'll be more issues with just you want to burn, and between you and the neighbor is a grass line or a thin prairie trail, and you risk it jumping across and getting onto his. So that's my biggest concern.
Yep. I got a backdated question here for fertilizer. You talked a lot about broadcasting with the urea. Do you think that means that anhydrous gas is not a good option?
No, it's I talk more about urea because of all the things you need to do around it as far as getting it covered up. If you're comfortable with anhydrous, we just had the last 2 years we've had dry springs, and so we were dealing with that top 3/4 to an inch of soil was pretty dry. It seems like we just dry things out a lot more. So people are I had a lot of problems last year with that dryness, and people are wondering, do I seed my normal canola depth or do I seed to moisture? And we seeded to normal depth. It was dry. About a third of the crop came up, and Memorial Day weekend here at the end of May, boom, flea beetles just took off, and it was crazy. And only a percentage of that crop came up because it was dry. We caught a rain, the rest comes up. So that's probably anhydrous. That's my biggest concern in the spring. I mean, but if you got decent moisture, it seals up, it works for you, and you've got time. You anhydrous, you catch a rain, it's not that big. It's no big deal. So, and it's just the biggest thing I hear is people look at the time it takes to do it and how much work they've got ahead of them, and it's just it doesn't feel good to them at this point.
I got one more question here on crop residue, Jason. It's just how many dollars of nutrients are you burning when you burn?
So that'll depend on the crop. I've seen numbers anywhere from probably $20 to $35 an acre. It will depend on, wheat is a very high carbon to nitrogen ratio, so I don't see as much there. But you got edible, or say soybeans. You risk the potential of all that residue. That breakdown of that soybean leaf, stem, pods. That is that nitrogen credit you get. So, it's there is a loss there. That is one thing. So I've seen numbers that are higher, but then it depends on, 200 bushel corn yield residue. You got like 8 tons to the acre residue. That's quite a bit of nutrients. So
Cool. I don't see any more coming in, so we could keep
okay.
going here unless there's others come later.
Sure. Yeah, this will be interesting this year, because there's basically 2 crops out there. There's the crop you got harvested before the blizzard, and then there's the crop after the blizzard, which, if I'd have been betting, I thought we had between a 0 and a 5% chance of getting this crop off after that October 11th, 12th blizzard. But what it has done, when I got back out the soil sample, I couldn't believe it how much, we probably lost anywhere from 5 to 15 bushel on soybeans, depending on plant structure. We had eardrop in corn, canola that was out after the blizzard. There's a tremendous amount of crop there. People got in a hurry because of the weather and pushed it, and so I know there's more volunteer wheat out there. So this is going to be a year where we've got to plan and think about this issue going forward, and how to manage around it. And it's going to be, I've had a couple people that we're going to, normally kochia is a weed we have to contend with, but volunteer canola is going to be probably a bigger one on those fields that were harvested after the blizzard. We're going to take some precautionary measures, maybe do some things different around herbicide, and just see what Mother Nature gives us. And which relates into this. This will be something to pay a lot of attention to again this year. I put this in here because initially we were going to be a very large switch to enlist soybeans down here. And what has happened is, as you move into the central western part of the soybean growing area of North Dakota, we are predominantly Extend and some Roundup Ready 2s, and a few enlist sprinkled in here. When you move east and southeast, they are pretty big enlist people. So it's matching up what you are looking to control and how you're going to control it. Most of my growers that I consult acres on, I saw were mostly Extend. But I had Extend, I had Roundup Ready 2s, I had some enlist, I had some straight Liberties. And all of our beans did fairly well. Some were getting tried out. The majority of the acres though were Extend because of our good friend kochia. And so this is just thinking about where you had those traits, and say you have issues with weeds, make sure you just keeping track of records. What was an Extend? And Extend beans, one thing they've done for me is they've been very good for weed control. But I've also taken now dicamba out of my herbicide rotation on all my other crops. I don't use dicamba in any like distinct in corn or status, and I will only use it. I've even taken it out of cereals in a burn down. I'll use other things. So just paying attention to those traits, which kind of rolls into the next topic of weed concerns. My weed I'm the most concerned about this upcoming year, with how wet we were and how late the season went, is common water hemp. I think we're going to see a very large population of this weed show up because people had so many other things on their mind, and harvest was top priority, that this weed had the potential to germinate all the way out into September and potentially put on seed. We still have kochia concerns. We still have common ragweed. We still have mare's tail or fleabane. But this is something we're going to have to pay attention to, which is tough all my growers use pre-emergent herbicides. I look at probably 8,000 acres of soybeans. All of them got pre-emerge products last year. Probably 7,200 acres of those were extends. We sprayed about 800 acres with dicamba post because the pre worked that well. Now that was last year, but we have every intention of using pre. And where we didn't use the dicamba over the top, the XtendiMax or the Ingenia, we just treated them like a Roundup Ready 2. And but I'm always on the lookout. I had one field this year with water hemp in. I'm expecting more. So, and we'll always have weeds, unfortunately, but it's just having a plan.
Cool. Just a reminder, we're getting, I think, near the end of the presentation, but if you do have questions on any of the topics, you can chat it or you can text. The text's been working well. 204-403-8444. So 204-403-8444, and we'll just keep feeding them in. There might have been a question there. No. Okay, we'll keep that. We'll get one here in a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, this is just a real quick thing. On my brother farms, my growers, everybody had grain moistures that went into bins that were higher than they'd like to be. We had people that dried grain down here, but for the most part, it was put in on air and ran. We had very high humidity this year. So it's two things. It's paying attention to the quality of the grain that you have to market, and also it's a safety thing. Because the grain is more moist or has a tendency, it wants to bridge up and stay in bins. And so let's just play it safe, everybody. Entering bins, or you've got grain that doesn't want to flow. I've had a local farmer here that died because of this back in February. So just pay attention. We need everybody, and play it safe. That's just a brief comment on that.
Okay. No, that's it goes through a lot of the 12 topics very well, and I thank you, Jason, for going through some of those challenges that we're going to be facing. I'll maybe pause here for a little bit, and we'll give it a minute or two for if there's any other questions on any of the topics that we want to ask Jason before we conclude today. We'll maybe give it 15 seconds here or so. Here's one. You mentioned water hemp. What's your strategy, Jason, for controlling water hemp in all crops?
Okay, I'm a big. It's about seed production with that weed. It's a little different. It has higher seed numbers than kochia, and it persists longer in the ground. So I'm a big advocate of pre-emergent. In some areas where they have more, they're probably foregoing, if they don't have kochia, they forego the pre, but they're using a lay-by, such as metallochlor, or products like that where you're putting out later to try to extend the residual control. It's small weeds. It's more water volume, no matter what system you're using, and then if you've got anything that looks suspicious in a field, it's about removing it, pulling it, taking it out of the field. If you pull water hemp and shake off the dirt off the roots, and you lay that on the ground, and you get a rain, that plant will root down, and it will be viable. So make sure you get all of that seed, our weeds, out of a field, because if you don't have the weeds, you don't have the seeds. So I'm just diligent. I even scout. Water hemp has stretched the scouting season out into harvest. So be on the lookout. Water grassways, borders, tree belts, any place where around rock piles, pay attention to that, because I had water hemp come off of my house from a bird and into a water catch that had filled up with dirt, and it was growing in there. So geese that accumulate in fields, that's one area that you can possibly get water hemp introduced into a field. So I'm after it because it's going to change a lot of things if I don't manage it. So I kind of take the nuclear route.
And are there any specific chemistries that you're using? You mentioned the pre-emerge and different things. Any specific in-crop or post-crop that you're looking at?
I use in my cereals, I use Husky down here. It is bromoxynil and pyrosulfatol. I've gone to that. I use pre-emergents that contain sulfentrazone in my peas and flax and soybeans and edibles. I'll use heat as a burn down in cereals if I have to. 2,4-D has worked very well. The dicamba has worked very well. Liberty's worked very well. So there are options. The challenge is don't let it get to the point where it explodes so fast. So if you've got to get a hold of some people and go grab a 6-pack of beer and you got to go out and pull it and have a pulling party, you better, I would do it and then physically remove it from the field.
Awesome. No, thank you so much, Jason. Unfortunately, we're probably getting to the end of our time, just to make sure keep on time. But thank you. You had awesome recommendations, questions. If I forgot to put it here, but if there's anyone wants to reach out to us, they can, or reach out specifically to Jason. How do they get in contact with you, Jason? I think I had your Twitter address before, but maybe if you want to share or not.
Yeah, I would say Twitter's the best way. You can go to my website. I should have put that on there. It's rockandrollagronomy.com. Twitter's probably my most active platform, but I'm going to use Instagram a lot more this year, and I'm going to kind of chronicle the year as a crop consultant through Instagram. So I use the same handle for my Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm not clever enough to figure out. I got to keep things simple, I guess. So, nice. But yeah, I do appreciate this and this opportunity. I wish everybody good luck and a profitable year.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining and learning the new technology, and you did great. So thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you. Yeah, you did all the legwork on this.
No, we're all learning in different times. So thank you for everyone who joined, and hopefully you're able to join next week. We got a rock star, as he claims, as he's laughing at me on the other side of the table. We're a good couple meters apart for sure. But we got What's Your Plan B? And Harry Davies from NorthStar Genetics will be sharing how soybeans can fit into your crop plan and a potential backup plan in the spring in case not everything goes perfect, how they can fit into your rotation. So it's probably 30 to 45 minutes next week, and we look forward to that. So we'll work out some of the kinks from this. We might send out a new link just to make sure we got everyone here. If there are some different challenges that you experienced today, please share them back to you so we can learn to get this better as we move forward. And hopefully it was a good hour with you guys. So once again, I'd like to thank Jason for his time, and I'd just like to thank all our customers, our retailers, and our farmers. Just thank you for your business. We're going to continue to work hard and bring different ways to help you guys grow the best crops that you can, whether that's soybeans, or corn. So any questions you have or feedback, please pass along. But once again, thank you for your business, and hopefully we'll see you next Thursday. So thank you, everyone.